the evidence of election fraud in 2020 has never been before a federal court for adjudication, nor has it been largely in front of state courts.
Let's go also to the election fraud. We know the election of 2020 was stolen. More information is coming out. Tulsi Gabbard was recently in Georgia. What do you suppose is cooking there? What do you think is
I think there's
happening?
a couple things going on simultaneously. First of all, for those who keep saying all of this was decided in Georgia, Trump's just raising this in, this has all been, that's all false. The same people who say, oh, Trump brought 60 different lawsuits and he lost all of them. No, he brought 60 lawsuits and none of them were heard. They were all dismissed on the basis of technicalities, usually standing. So the evidence of election fraud in 2020 has never been before a federal court for adjudication, nor has it been largely in front of state courts. Secondarily, of course, we know that a Fulton County official, Fulton County, Georgia, testified before the Georgia State Election Board only weeks ago and said, yes, there were 315,000 votes for which we have no signatures and no record. That's a violation of state law. That's known as probable cause. Trump only lost by 11,000 some odd votes in the final count. And also, I think if you go back and listen to the entire transcript or the entire recording of the president's call with the Secretary of State, and you see it in context, he doesn't say, go out and find me 11,000 votes. He says, you have already inadvertently counted more than 11,000 votes. So just finding enough illegal votes that have been counted would make me the winner, which it would have. But then there's the other front, which is the electronic voting machines. There is no question whatsoever that the working group in the United States, which appears to be headed by Tulsi Gabbard, has very solid evidence of both Venezuelan and Chinese online interference in our election. I do have to tell you, Eric, there are elements within our own government who don't want that information to come out, don't want it to be reviewed. I suspect it's because there are some in our intelligence agencies who've used this same technology to interfere in foreign elections in the past, and perhaps were involved in the use of it here in the United States. So it is a struggle internally, but the president is very serious about getting to the bottom of it. He's chosen the right person because Tulsi Gabbard demonstrated to us in the Russian collusion hoax, where she finally declassified all the documents, proving that that was the greatest single dirty trick in American political history and probably the largest single abuse of power. But whether those criminals, the people who were involved in a seditious conspiracy that started in the Obama White House, continued through the Russian collusion hoax, continued through two phony impeachment, baseless impeachments, then moves to the election of 2020, which I think is fraudulent, the January 6th Fed surrection, the so-called documents case against Donald Trump, the appointment of Jack Smith, who runs an extra constitutional operation to get Donald Trump, spying on U.S. senators and congressmen and others in the wake. That is one continuing conspiracy. Same people, same conspirators, and therefore a grand jury in southern Florida, this district of South Florida, can charge people for those crimes. It remains to be seen whether that's going to happen, but I'm praying for it.
I mean, clearly there are many Americans who really just want to see justice, and we're tired of hearing about, things are happening. Do you have any sense whether the Department of Justice is on the job? Because many people have expressed doubt about that.
Look, I think the jury is still out, and I'm not going to prejudge. But I do recognize it didn't take them very long to charge me, to charge General Flynn, to charge Donald Trump. So at a certain point, you're going to have to ask what's going on in this realm. I do have to say, going back to election integrity, because I think it's part of this whole puzzle, the mainstream media, working with the Democrats, did a great job of shutting down any examination of this extensive fraud. If you question the election, they tried to make that a crime, even though everybody has a First Amendment free speech right to question the election. But they decided to make it a crime. They decided that if you raised any of these questions, whether it was 300,000 ballots popping up out of nowhere at 3:00 in the morning in Michigan after the Republican observers had been physically removed by the Detroit police and after they boarded over the windows so that nobody could observe. If you raise those questions, you're some kind of a nut. You're some kind of a conspiracy theorist. What's wrong with you? So they did a very good job of suppressing this. I don't think they'll be allowed to suppress it or able to suppress it a second time.
Well, again, what Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and James Comey and Clapper and Brennan and on and on and on have done demands justice. So I'm just wondering, what do you suppose the president's view is of these things? Does he not? Maybe he doesn't care. Maybe he's kind of moved on. It's difficult to understand.
I don't speak for the president, quite obviously, but I don't think that's true at all. I think the president is committed to accountability and justice. Now, the left would try to tell you this is about revenge and retaliation, which is absurd because they're the ones who tried to destroy him. They're the ones who tried to impoverish him. They're the ones who tried to break him financially. They're the ones who tried to keep him off the ballot in 50 states. They're the ones who tried to put him in jail. And now, when you go back and examine how they broke the law and violated the Constitution, they say, oh, that's retaliation and revenge. No, it's accountability and justice. I think the president is still deeply committed to it.
I mean, and we have to, say, why do we care what they say? They lie so horribly. I mean, it's really a fascinating thing that we're worried about what they say, or they're going, oh, gosh, they'll call Trump a fascist and authoritarian. They've been doing that since 2016. So at this point, I really do hope that we push all this stuff through. I think that we need a thorough cleansing, that America cannot really, we can't go forward unless we deal with what happened starting in 2016, but obviously with the election fraud. It's a subversion of the will of we the people. Doesn't get worse than that, Roger. Like, that's it. That's the end of America. If we have elites kind of running things and saying, well, it's nice what you people think, but we don't really care. We're going to do what we want to do. And, the deep state, I don't know about you, but I had not heard of the term deep state until the end of 2020. It's the first time I heard that term. And I thought, deep state, what's the deep state? Because that's how naive I was. And I think most Americans realize that we have a decades-long problem that needs fixing. You have been great at helping me, see this going back, through Reagan to JFK, that we have had this elite class in DC running things. And that's not what the founders set up. I just finished a 600-page book, which I wrote on the American Revolution. And it is so astonishing to me how far we have drifted from the founding vision of what America is supposed to be. And I think most Americans would like to go back to that. But in order to go back to that, we have to deal with the last 60 years. And obviously, again, you've been really great in explicating what it is that we've been, gaslit into believing.
Well, and the president has been a real leader. He's certainly shown the leadership to get to the bottom of who really killed John F. Kennedy. He's shown the leadership to get to the bottom of who really killed Senator Robert Kennedy. He's committed to getting to the bottom of who really killed Dr. Martin Luther King, because I don't think the individuals charged in any of those cases, I've written books on a couple of them, are actually the perps. Dwight Eisenhower put it best when he was leaving. He warned us about the military-industrial complex, the buildup of power between some in the bureaucracy, the think tanks, the defense contractors, and so on. And they have had a disproportionate amount of power. The last thing in the world they expected was the election of Donald Trump. I mean, everybody knew this was going to be Jeb Bush versus Hillary Clinton, who's kind of heads you win, tails I win. It didn't really matter. So Trump has changed things in a profound way. He staged the greatest single comeback in American political history, something the odds were overwhelmingly against. I happen to think divine intervention is a key factor in that, because on paper, it should not have been possible, but it happened. And I point out to you, we carried Arizona while our U.S. Senate candidate, Carrie Lake, lost. we carried Wisconsin while our U.S. Senate candidate there lost. That's highly improbable, if not impossible. So I think there's still interference in our elections. Thank God we have a man in the White House who is committed to exposing all of that and exposing the foibles of the deep state, and who is deeply committed to both peace and prosperity.
Before we go, Roger, I have to ask you, can you give us any wisdom? You don't have to if you don't want to, but on what's going on with Tucker Carlson. I could not be more mystified by his drifting into some of the places that he's drifted, some of which seems to me to be openly anti-Semitic. It just, I cannot figure it out what's going on.
Tucker Carlson is a good friend of mine. I frankly don't think I'd be with you here today if he hadn't been a full-throated advocate for my pardon when I was framed in the Mueller investigation. I haven't talked to him recently, so I can't tell you his point of view. I find the attacks on him equally tedious. Beyond that, I really have no comment.
Well, I'm glad I asked you, and I appreciate that. Roger Stone, we love you. Thanks for coming on.
Great to be with you. And that is a great-looking shirt.